Hello, African Confessions. I am back with another episode. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message reads like this. Good morning, African Confessions. There was this pastor who was way obsessed with sex, and he used me to satisfy his sexual desires. And no matter how much he tried to preach, his sermons were always empty. They lacked the Spirit of God. He did not have the blessing of God at all. All he worshipped was sex with his manhood, while his manhood was not even functional at all. Sometimes he would just go flat like a balloon that had been deflated. Then he would try to jumpstart his manhood, and sometimes it would rise again. Sometimes it will embarrass him, and I'll be watching. Things men let me laugh. Things that men do let me laugh. I am a 35-year-old woman who has been inspired by your previous post to share my experience with this so-called fake man of God. In my early 20s, I met a man of God who was in his late 30s. This man, he was a pastor who was a divorcee, and when I met him, he told me his story just like any other normal human being would do. He told me that his wife was always violent, and he fought with his wife always fought with his parents, and she was not a wife material. Only after being involved with that pastor, that is when I realized his true character. Everything was about him, and he was very obsessed with himself. I was not allowed to talk to anyone, and whenever I would see people that I knew, and whenever I would just wave at anyone, it would become a very big story with him. He would be like, why are you greeting that guy? Are you in love with him? Basically, I was not even allowed to greet or talk to anyone that was not him. My eyes were blinded. In him, I had seen the man of my dreams. I saw the man whom I was going to marry one day. I had finally seen the man who was going to marry me one day, and I would picture myself as the pastor's wife. It gave me great pleasure whenever I thought that one day I would be called pastor's wife. One day, I was seen in town walking with my brother. He came to my place to see me. He was in fighting mode, ready to attack me. I had to explain why and how was I walking with a man who was wearing a purple shirt. But this man, he was my brother. I had lost my freedom. Every time that we met, the first thing was to explain myself why I was talking to a male figure, or why my phone died whilst I was still talking to him. I remember very well that on this other particular day, he called me and I was on my way to catch a taxi to go and see him. He then called me. At that time, I had a small Nokia phone and it had a battery problem, so it instantly just switched off whenever the battery would be low. That was an offense to him. He would be like, why did your phone switch off? My life was full of accusations after accusations. I started growing weary. I saw that this relationship, it was no longer about love. It was about total control. That guy, he was fake. He wanted to control everything, from the things that I would wear, from the food that I would eat. He was always controlling me. I once attended his church service, and one painful thing is seeing people who are hungry for the word of God being lied to by a human being who knows the truth but chooses to do the wrong things. Like I said in my introduction, that church service was the waste of my time, because as I was looking at him, he was just mumbling throughout his sermon and he was trying so hard to get to a point. I noticed that this was just an empty vessel. This was no man of God. He was indeed one of those fake prophets. The Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. He was unlike that guy that I had met when I started dating him, because he was filled with the Spirit of the Lord. I had even tried to tempt him the moment that I had met him to get in bed with him, but he had refused. But all of a sudden, he had just changed. He was no longer that man of God. This guy, he was all about pleasing his flesh rather than pleasing his spiritual body. He would invite me to his house, and all he would do with me was to have sex with me. He would have sex with me in this room while other people who resided there were present. He was never embarrassed. Even his bodyguard, if the bodyguard would be there, he would just say to me, let us have sexual intercourse. And I was always embarrassed because he would be touching me, my private parts. Even his bodyguard, when he would be with us in the car, he would just touching me, my private parts. I was always embarrassed. There was this other day we had to travel throughout the night. I still remember that he reached a point that he wanted me to give him a blowjob whilst we were traveling in the car. Yet his driver was there. He was the one who was driving the car. When I refused, he said that it is in the night. There is nothing that he can see. He will just concentrate on his driving. I tried so much, but he kept on pushing me. That is when he pulled out his manhood and he said, please just give me this blowjob. So I gave him that blowjob as his bodyguard was with us in the car. It was really embarrassing. I remember one day he took me outside of the house and we went and we sat outside of the house behind the garage. We were talking and we were just chilling. Then he just said, let us do it right here. I was like, what if people will just see us? And he said, who is going to see us? There is no one. There is only my bodyguard. This was outside in the daylight and the people were inside their house. He forced me and we did it. Now, when I look back and also listened to the stories that I have heard on this channel, everything is now making sense. One last incident that I will never forget was when I found out that he was sleeping with my cousin sister too. I became overpowered and they had come up with a plan to get rid of me. I then decided to leave the relationship, but it was not easy. Now that I look back, I am proud that I managed to leave that terrible relationship. That man, he loved sex so much that when we are walking, he would just stop and say, let us get into the bush and let us have sexual intercourse. That guy, yes, he was in the ministry, but I do not know for what reason. Maybe it was just the devil. Ladies out there, be careful of these so-called men of God. Some of them, their intentions are not good at all. Because when I think of all the abuses that I faced whilst I was dating this so-called men of God, the things that he made me to do whilst we were in bed, this guy, he was so obsessed with a woman's body. Now he is still leading this church and I am actually afraid of the things that he can do to other women, because the things that he did to me, even though he claimed that he loved me, I imagine things that he will do to someone that he doesn't love. Please, Brother Nashi, when you have posted my story, tell me so that I can follow up in the comment section. Dear listeners, right there was a message that I received from one of our listeners. You're a man of God doing all of these things. Please let us talk about this issue in the comment section. I'll be back with another episode.